He said this to indicate the kind of death he was to die. You know, my brothers and sisters, for all the talk about death in the Gospels, this culture of ours, so deeply shaped by the Bible, has always been very good at avoiding the subject. Well, of course we do. We're all scared to die. As that great theologian Jerry Seinfeld once observed, the most feared event in life is public speaking, followed by death. So it's less stressful during a funeral to be in the casket than to deliver the eulogy. Laugh about death, sure, but avoid it? No way. Every 10 seconds, 26 of us earthlings dies. 2 are Buddhist, 4 are Hindus, 6 are Muslims, 7 are Christians, and the other 7, well, they're from the world's other great religion or no religion at all. Facing death is one of life's greatest, most absorbing thrills and challenges. And today, as you and I mark this one-week countdown to Holy Week and the most commemorated death in human history, we do so by talking about death, and more precisely, how we help ourselves and others deal with the trauma of death. So with that in mind, with this sermon, I'd like to offer us a couple of observations and strategies for helping us and others through death and through the grief that accompanies it. Now, maybe today you're mourning the death of a loved one. Maybe you're scared about your own upcoming and inevitable death. Maybe you have a friend you want to reach out to who's grieving deeply and is trying to cope. Yes, COVID has all of us thinking about our own mortality and grieving all sorts of things. If the gospel of Jesus Christ is about anything, it's about helping you and me through tough times. The gospel is about giving you and I hope to know that no matter how bad things are, we do not walk alone. We walk with someone who loves us and who has made promises of provision. So by gaining a greater understanding of what this is all about, you and I can more deeply live into the abundant life that Jesus talked about and invites us into. And we can also help others through their suffering. So as a touchstone, author and speaker Megan Devine and her wonderful work in the website refugeingrief.com is a fabulous resource that I'm going to use as we explore grief and as we explore ways to handle it. Now, not long ago, a friend of mine was sharing the story of his mother's new apartment. He told a group of us we were socially distant, gathered around a back porch table, and he told us that his mother had set up in her bedroom this elaborate shrine, if you will, to her husband, who had died 20 years previous. "Wow, I can't believe she's not over it," said one of the guys around the table. Well, sure, to him, the death was 2 decades ago. But to this widow, it seemed like it happened just yesterday. So the first thing we need to consider when we talk about grief is that grief is in the eye of the beholder. Nobody can tell us how to grieve, how long or how deep. Nobody can anticipate how they or others will grieve. Researcher and writer Elizabeth Kubler-Ross is well known for her work defining the famous 5 stages of grief: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. She may have hit on most of the main emotions that we experience, but she never intended this to be the formula our order-making minds wish it was. And because of that, we do well to listen to the scriptures. I love Paul's comment in the book of Philippians. He says this: "Do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility regard others as better than ourselves." So as we approach somebody who's grieving, the first thing we want to do is put them in charge, keep the focus on them. It's super, super important that we do that. And I'm constantly struggling to do that because grief is something that we're not comfortable with. If grief is still strong for that widow after 20 years, it's still strong for that widow after 20 years. Grief affects everybody differently. We all have our own way of handling it, and so handling ourselves and others who are grieving means paying deference to their proclivities, to what's going on in our souls, and to this precarious nature of grief. Ever watch a 6-year-old play with their cars or play with their dolls? They can spend hours meticulously putting them in line, making order with them, because that's just what they do. And folks, that's just what we do. You and I in the West, we live in this order-making, problem-solving culture. We see something that needs fixing, we try to fix it. We see a problem that needs solving, we try to solve it. We see pain that needs healing, we try to heal it. But unlike a broken leg or a bruised elbow, grief just doesn't work that way. Grief is a byproduct of love. Want to avoid grief? That's easy. Don't love anybody or anything. That means solving the problem of grief is like solving the problem of love. You can't do it because it's not a problem. Grief is not a problem to be solved, but a condition to be managed. Did you get that? Grief is not a problem to be solved, but a condition to be managed. And when we treat our friends who are grieving on their own terms and not on our own, I'll fix you terms, we do much more good. In fact, when somebody's grieving, we do more harm than good when we try to fix it. Earlier this week, I posted a talk on Facebook called 3 Things to Say at a Funeral. Why? Because funerals, like visiting nursing homes or hospitals, even contacting somebody who's going through trauma, are all things that many of us avoid because the subject can be so sticky. What do I say? What do I do? Well, people who are grieving need 3 things from us. First, we need to validate their sorrow. They need validation, like honoring a person's own right to grieve in the way they want to grieve. We need to truth tell. We need to acknowledge alongside them that what they're going through is bad. And this is a tough time, that their feelings of loss are not abnormal. A friend of mine got a load of cards in the mail when her husband died, and the only one she saved was from a 10-year-old. And the card simply said, "Oh no." Grieving people need to know that their situation is indeed a bad one, that pain and hurt is okay. Second, grieving friends need to know that you care. Now, you can tell them you love them, you can tell them that you care for them, but they need to know that you're concerned. Not visiting, not calling, not texting is a cop-out. Find a way to express the fact that you care about them. And third, grieving people need to know that you're here, that you're present. You can choose to be in a lot of different places, but you've chosen to be with your friend in their time of sadness. As the saying goes, grief shared is grief lessened. These 3 things, that's it. Don't try to fix things, remember, because nothing's broken. We can't fix it because it's not a disease that needs a cure. It's a state that needs to be managed. And yes, we can actually make things worse by trying to fix it. I have a feeling that more than one person in this service right now has a story about a well-meaning but poorly equipped loved one who failed miserably trying to bring comfort to somebody in grief. I have a friend who lost his brother to a boating accident, tragic accident. There were hundreds of people at the wake and at the funeral. Many of them contributed to a special fund to promote boat safety. And after it was over, my friend took some time to write down and categorize the things he was told by well-wishers. Now, here are some of the categories and comments that he noted. There were the look at the bright side comments. At least he was the only one in the boat. Just think if that crash had happened near the crowded sandbar. There were the find a purpose in this comments. Boy, look at all the people he brought together for this funeral. Just think of how many people will benefit from the money raised for the boat safety fund. There were the me-centered comments, right? You know these. Well, I remember when my brother died, right? I know what you're going through because I lost my cat once. There are the who's to blame comments. Boating's always been a dangerous hobby. It was so sunny out there, I'm sure it was blinding. And of course, the religious comments. God has God's reasons, we just don't know what they are. He's finally able to be with his grandma and grandpa up in heaven. And of course, heaven needed another angel. Now, the temptation to help a grieving person feel better is so great. We hate to see other people in pain. And it's because we feel that pain too. Scientists tell us that we're all connected neurobiologically, so that being around somebody who's grieving makes us sad. And in our haste to alleviate our pain, we try to fix others. But after we offer our 2 cents to the bereaved and overcharge them at that, we can see that our fixing does no good. After all, the subtext of every one of these well-meaning but ill-informed comments is what's heard by the mourner. And that subtext is this: so stop feeling so bad. At least there was only one person in the boat, so stop feeling so bad. Boating's always been a dangerous hobby, so stop feeling so bad. Heaven needed another angel, so stop feeling so bad. That's what they hear, because that's what we're trying to do. And in doing so, we violate rule number 1. We minimize their feelings. We invalidate the depth of their grief, of their pain. And we show a rather shallow level of concern instead of doing something more needful and helpful, the work of sticking to the big 3: validate, care, and presence. When somebody's hurting, of course we want to cure them, but we can't because they're not sick. They don't need to find a cure. They need to find a way through it. They need to find a way to cope. Validation, care, presence are the most difficult acts of love that we are called to practice. 1 week from today, we'll finally be able to welcome folks back onto our property for worship. We'll march around the campus waving palm branches, and we will join Jesus in Jesus' journey of pain, his journey of love. Folks, the journey of love is often a painful journey, stopping us from saying the things that we want to say. Our world needs to know that we want to put that love into action. So the questions are, what are we grieving this morning? What unhelpful advice are we giving ourselves? And what are the ways we're looking to escape from it instead of coping with it and letting it do what it needs to do? Who is there around us who is grieving? How might we come alongside them in their time of sadness? And how can we put to practice the love in our hearts? Friends, the Christian hope that we all carry is that we never grieve alone, that God walks with us on the highest mountain and through the darkest valley. That's what love does. Now let us go and do likewise. Amen.